Under the scorching Lego sun, Margaret went into labor, alone on the construction site. No doctors, no nurses, just sweat, dust, and courage. Amid falling cement and rusted steel, she gave birth to Jeffrey, her newborn crying into the chaos. James ran to her side, heart pounding, and in that moment, love, fear, and destiny collided. A child born in struggle, destined to rise.
You're about to hear a story that carries the heart of Africa. Subscribe to African Folktales by MaC-Anison TV, where every week we share rarest African folktales you won't find anywhere else. Your subscription is the fuel that inspires us to bring you the very best of our storytelling heritage. The story began under the scorching Lagos sun, that familiar, unrelenting heat that makes the air shimmer like a restless spirit. At a half-finished construction site in the heart of the city, life unfolded in sweat, dust, and the echo of hammer strikes against concrete. Among the noise worked James, the foreman, a man whose muscles bore the story of struggle and whose silence carried the wisdom of hardship. They said he was a man who spoke less and labored more, one who believed that a man's hands are his certificate when destiny denies him paper. Across the same site came Margaret, a young woman with eyes that had seen more hunger than hope, yet still carried a glimmer that refused to die. An orphan, barefoot in destiny's marketplace, she had no family but faith, no education but endurance. Her palms were blistered from carrying blocks, but her heart carried something far heavier, the desire to survive. That was how they met. Two souls the world had forgotten, finding each other amid falling cement dust. What began as casual greetings at the water drum slowly grew into conversations, then laughter that dared to echo above the sound of iron and stone. Soon that laughter became love, the kind that doesn't announce itself with roses, but proves itself in sweat and sacrifice. Margaret and James were both unlearned, but they shared a rare form of intelligence, the wisdom of hardship. They knew, as the elders say, when life closes the school gates, the streets become a classroom. Together they learned discipline, diligence, and the art of finding joy in labor. Their love story was simple, yet sacred. Under unfinished pillars and rusted iron rods, they built dreams that no architect could draft. When Margaret became pregnant, James's heart carried a storm of fear and pride. He urged her to stay home, to rest, to protect the fragile miracle growing within her. But Margaret refused gently, her voice carrying both tenderness and iron. "My dear husband," she said one morning, "you know you're my source of inspiration. Working with you keeps me alive. Staying home feels like dying slowly, because then I'll think only of our suffering. When I see you work, I'm reminded that life still has meaning. Let me stay by your side. I am fine. I haven't given birth yet. Please, let me work with you." Her words were music and defiance intertwined. James tried to insist, but love sometimes is not authority. It is surrender. And so, he allowed her to keep working. The other laborers watched her in silent respect, murmuring among themselves that her courage was the kind only hunger could teach. Then came that day, the day when destiny decided to test the strength of her heart. It was noon. The sky hung heavy with heat, and the sound of hammers filled the air. Margaret had gone to fetch blocks at the far end of the site, where the wind barely reached. A sudden pain gripped her belly, deep, primal, unstoppable. She gasped, staggered, and dropped to her knees. Her cries for help were swallowed by the noise of labor and machinery. Alone, drenched in sweat, her body trembling, she realized the child was coming. There, surrounded by dust and unfinished dreams, Margaret gave birth. No nurse, no doctor, no sterile room, just the raw courage of womanhood and the will to live. In that sacred moment, pain met purpose, and a child named Jeffrey
was born into the chaos of Lagos. His first breath rose with the sound of cement falling, a tiny cry that pierced through the noise of the world like a prophecy. At that same moment, James was searching frantically. His spirit told him something was wrong. He called out her name. "Margaret! Margaret!" His voice echoing through steel beams and scaffolds. No answer. Then, like a whisper from heaven, he felt her presence pulling him toward the far end of the site. When he found her, his heart nearly stopped. Margaret lay on the rough ground, her wrapper soaked in blood, her eyes half closed, yet her hands cradled their newborn son as if protecting the very essence of life. "Oh, my dear wife, Margaret," James whispered, dropping beside her, trembling. "I told you to rest, but you wouldn't listen. I feared this might happen. Please tell me you're okay." Margaret smiled weakly, her lips trembling. "I'm fine, my husband," she murmured. "Just so tired." James's eyes filled with tears, but he forced his voice steady. "Don't worry. I'll clean you up. You and the baby will be fine." He ran, found a wrapper, returned, and carefully cleaned them both, his rough hands now trembling with tenderness. The other laborers soon gathered, silent in awe. They watched this man cradle his family in the dust, their hearts heavy with respect. "Truly," one whispered, "the woman who labors with her husband builds an empire even poverty cannot destroy." The site manager, upon hearing the story, was astonished. He arrived later that day, his usually stern face softened. "Take 2 months off," he said kindly. "You've both earned it." James fell to his knees, overwhelmed with gratitude. With the help of fellow workers, he found a taxi. As the cab drove off, carrying Margaret and baby Jeffrey, the laborers waved, their dusty faces smiling through tears. In that moment, under the Lagos sun, they weren't just workers, they were witnesses to a miracle. 5 years later, the small family had grown in joy, if not in wealth. Their home was a modest room with cracked walls and leaky ceilings, but laughter filled it daily. Little Jeffrey, 5 years old, was the heartbeat of the household, bright-eyed, curious, and as charming as sunrise. "Mommy! Daddy, we'll be late for work!" he shouted one morning, his tiny voice echoing through the room. "Come on, let's go before the manager arrives. You know, punctuality is the soul of business." Margaret laughed, the kind of laugh that could soften even sorrow. "Oh, my lovely Jeffrey, you're so small yet so wise. Aren't you supposed to be in school by now? Your father and I should have enrolled you, but things haven't been easy." She sighed, her voice trembling slightly. "Don't worry. We'll try everything to send you to school. Every time I see you follow us to work, it breaks my heart." Jeffrey, small but bold, smiled and held her hand. "Mommy, don't be sad. I'm happy going with you and Daddy. It gives me joy. I love what you both do, and I want to become an architect someday. This is the best education you could ever give me." Margaret's eyes glistened. Children, she thought, often carry the wisdom that adults forget. The boy's words settled in her heart like morning dew. James, listening quietly, placed his hand on his son's head. "You speak like an elder, my boy," he said softly. "Maybe you're the dream we never got to live." Jeffrey looked up with innocent conviction. "Don't worry, Daddy. If God has destined that I'll go to school, I will. Until then, can we go to work now? We're running late." They all laughed, that kind of laughter that pushes pain to the background for a moment. As they stepped out together into the busy Lagos morning, the hum of buses, the shout of conductors, the rhythm of a restless city, they looked like any other poor family. But to the unseen eyes of destiny, they were more. A trinity of faith, labor, and love. And somewhere, perhaps beyond the clouds, the ancestors whispered, "When greatness is born in dust, even kings must bow to its rise." because from the very soil where Margaret once bled, a star had been born, and his name was Geoffrey. They believed deeply that where there is a will, there is a way. To them, this wasn't just a saying, it was survival scripture. James and Margaret, two souls molded by hardship, carried that belief like a torch through the darkness. Their dream was simple yet sacred, to give their son Geoffrey the education they never had. And so every sunrise found them at the construction site, working harder, saving every coin, and whispering prayers into the dust. That morning, Lagos hummed like an orchestra of life. The shouts of conductors, the clang of metal, the heartbeat of a restless city. At the site, workers moved like ants across a giant concrete anthill. Amidst them was a small figure, Geoffrey, carrying tiny blocks, his face glowing with determination. His little arms trembled under the weight, but his spirit burned brighter than the sun overhead. The men watched him, astonished. "This child is something else," one murmured, shaking his head. "Even some grown men can't lift those blocks." Another laughed. "Maybe it's because he was born in a construction site. That's where his strength comes from. He came from the womb of hard labor itself." Laughter rippled through the air, but behind their humor was awe. Geoffrey, small as he was, worked like one carrying the pride of generations. He never tired, never complained. The dust clung to his skin like gold dust on a chosen child. Even the supervisors admired him, and the manager, hardened by years of labor politics, often smiled when he saw the boy. James and Margaret stood side by side, their hearts swelling with quiet pride. They had little to give their son but example, so they gave it lavishly. "The child who sees the sweat of his parents learns the worth of bread," the ancestors would say. And in Geoffrey's eyes, they saw reflection, of hope, of continuity, of purpose. But young Geoffrey's curiosity burned beyond bricks and mortar. He wasn't just helping, he was learning. Every nail that struck, every line drawn on a blueprint fascinated him. His eyes followed the architect's pencil the way a child watches fireflies in the dark, full of wonder, full of questions. That bright morning, the boy's courage overcame his fear. He dusted his small hands on his shorts, walked up to the architect, and stood before him with respectful calm. "Good morning, sir," he said, his voice as clear as the sky after rain. The architect looked down and smiled. "Good morning, young Geoffrey. How are you today?" "I'm fine, thank you, sir," Geoffrey replied politely. Then, after a moment's hesitation, he asked softly, "Sir, can I ask you a favor?" The man chuckled kindly. "Of course, my boy." "What is it?" Geoffrey's small chest rose with courage. "Please don't be angry, sir. I'm thankful that you let me be here, even though I'm still small. Thank you for letting my mommy and daddy work too. We'll never disappoint you, but—" The architect leaned closer, intrigued. "But what, Geoffrey?" "Sir," the boy continued, his voice trembling with honesty, "can you teach me? Can you teach me how you draw your designs, how you create your plans? I want to learn, sir. I want to be like you when I grow up." The words struck the man like lightning, pure, innocent, divine. He blinked, trying to hold back tears. But the tears came anyway, uninvited, warm, and human. Geoffrey's eyes widened in panic. "Sir, please don't cry." "I'm sorry if I said something wrong. Please don't send me, my mommy, and my daddy away. I just wanted to tell you that you inspire me. I love how you work. I love your drawings. That's why I asked. But it's okay, sir. I'm sorry." The architect knelt, his face now level with the child's. He placed his hands gently on Geoffrey's shoulders. "Oh, my dear little Jeffrey," he said softly, smiling through tears. "I'm not crying because you offended me. I'm crying because you've touched me. You speak like an old soul. You know you're supposed to be in school, right?" Jeffrey nodded, eyes lowered. "Yes, sir, I know. Mommy and Daddy promised they'll put me in school someday, but they already do so much for me. Sometimes they sleep hungry just so I can eat. Sometimes Mommy's so tired, but even when Daddy tells her to rest, she says she'd rather work beside him than stay home thinking about how unfair life has been. They sacrifice everything for me, sir." The architect's chest tightened. Each word from the boy was a mirror reflecting his own forgotten gratitude. Jeffrey continued, voice soft but steady. "I love my parents, sir. I know one day God will bless us, but for now I just want to learn. You're my role model. Every morning when I wake up, I'm happy because I know I'll see you. See how you draw, how you plan, how you build. It feels like magic. Thank you, sir, for inspiring me." Silence fell, thick, sacred, unforgettable. The architect looked at Jeffrey with eyes that saw beyond poverty. In that moment, he saw a prophecy wrapped in dust. He smiled gently. "Jeffrey," he whispered, "I never knew I inspired you so much. From this day, I promise I will never fail you. I will draw with greater purpose. I will build with more heart. Because you, my boy, you are my inspiration too." And as the Lego sun climbed higher, its rays fell on the boy's face like a benediction. Around them, the construction site pulsed with life. Hammers striking, cement mixing, dreams rising from dust. But in the midst of it all stood two souls, a man of vision and a boy of destiny, bound by hope, by admiration, by the silent promise that even from the humblest soil, greatness can rise. Somewhere, beyond the noise and concrete, the ancestors whispered, "The seed that falls on stone may still find a crack, and from that crack, destiny will bloom." The sun hung low above Lagos that evening, its golden rays bleeding through the hazy skyline and settling softly over the half-built structures of the construction site. The hum of machines had quieted, leaving only the sighs of tired men and the whisper of the wind brushing against scaffolds. Amid the settling dust stood Jeffrey, small, wide-eyed, his face streaked with sweat and dreams too large for his little frame. The architect, Mr. Isaac, tall and gentle-eyed, watched him with the quiet wonder of a man seeing his own past reflected in another's gaze. When Jeffrey's voice broke through the hum of the dying day, "Really, sir? I'm also your source of inspiration? Yay! So we're a team, right?" It wasn't just childish excitement. It was innocence believing in possibility. Mr. Isaac chuckled softly, the kind of laugh that carried warmth rather than sound. "Yes, Jeffrey, we're a team. And don't worry, from now on, I will teach you. But first you have to go to school. Here's what we'll do. I'll speak with your mommy and daddy, and together we'll make a plan to send you to school. Every day after school, you'll come here to the construction site and work with me. I'll teach you everything you need to know." But the smile that had brightened Jeffrey's dusty face faltered. The joy dimmed like a flickering bulb. His little hands fidgeted with a piece of stone, his eyes falling to the ground. Mr. Isaac noticed immediately, the way an elder senses the shift in wind before a storm. "Jeffrey," he said softly, kneeling beside him, "why are you sad? You're supposed to be happy." Jeffrey's lips trembled before he spoke. "I know, sir. Thank you so very much, and please don't mind my mood. I'm just deeply touched by your kindness. But, sir, that isn't necessary. Going to school costs a lot of money. Money we could use to feed. I believe that if I work hard and learn from you, I'll be able to build someday." You're the best, sir, and I can learn everything from you. I don't really have to go to school, right? For a moment, silence wrapped them both, heavy, human, and real. The kind that carried both hope and heartbreak. Then Mr. Isaac smiled and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. Listen, my dear Jeffrey. This job, requires you to know how to read and write. Tell me, if you don't know how to read, how will you map out your drawings? How will you explain your plans to others? How will you draw if you don't even know how to write? You see, Jeffrey, being an architect is different from being a builder. The architect dreams the structure into existence. He designs, draws, and plans. The builders, with strength and skill, bring that dream to life. But without knowledge, a dream remains only wind in the mouth. Jeffrey's eyes widened. In that instant, a light flickered behind them, the awakening of understanding. "Oh, really?" he gasped. Then, with the sudden certainty of a soul reborn, he said, No, sir. I'll go to school. Now that you've explained it to me, I understand. I want to go to school so that one day I'll become a successful architect, just like you." As the sun disappeared behind the skyline, the construction site stood still, like it too was listening. Later that evening, under the fading gold of twilight, Mr. Isaac and the manager called Jeffrey's parents, Mr. James and Mrs. Margaret, aside. The couple arrived humbly, the wear of years visible in their clothes and eyes, yet there was pride in the way they stood, the quiet dignity of survivors. "Mr. James, Mrs. Margaret," the manager began, his tone gentle with Mr. Isaac standing beside him. "We called you here to discuss our plans to help your son, Jeffrey, go to school. Let's put our heads together and see how we can make this happen." He paused, smiled warmly, then continued. "Jeffrey is a special child, determined, intelligent, and full of promise. You know what they say, a child is not raised by one person alone. We all adore Jeffrey here. He's like a son to everyone on this site. Even when we're tired, one look at Jeffrey gives us strength. His energy, his passion, it's contagious." Mr. Isaac nodded silently beside him, the weight of truth heavy on his heart. The manager continued, "We can't allow such determination to fade away. So the architect and I would like to support you in any way we can, so that together we can send Jeffrey to school, even if it's just a basic education for now. He deserves at least the chance to learn how to read and write. Do you know that Jeffrey told me today he wants to become an architect when he grows up? He said Mr. Isaac is his inspiration. This child is a star in the making. He has a bright future ahead of him, and without education, that dream will remain out of reach." There was silence. Then the sound of quiet sobbing broke it. Mr. and Mrs. James fell to their knees, tears glistening in the dim light. Gratitude poured from their trembling lips. "Thank you so very much, sir," Mr. James said, voice quivering with emotion. "May God continue to bless you. Thank you for helping us, for wanting to help our son go to school. We will never forget this kindness." And so, under the cracked skies of Lagos, amid dust and sweat and sacrifice, a seed was planted. Jeffrey was enrolled in the community primary school. From that day forward, his small hands gripped his pencil with the same firmness they once held stones. His determination deepened, as though he carried within him the hopes of every forgotten child who had ever stared at the gates of opportunity from the outside. Some who heard him speak of his dream, to build the tallest building in the world, laughed. They saw only his torn shoes and dusty shirt, but dreams are not judged by appearances. As the elders say, the size of the seed never reveals the size of the tree it will become. In class, Jeffrey was always attentive, eyes bright, mind alert, heart hungry. After school, he would hurry to the site to help the architect and his parents. His teachers spoke of him with awe, The workers adored him. The world, though it did not yet know it, had begun to shift quietly in his favor. Jeffrey became a living proverb, a reminder that no dream is too tall for the child who kneels to learn. And so began the story of Jeffrey, the boy from the dust, whose faith and humility turned a construction site into a classroom, and whose dreams reached for the sky long before his hands could. Time moved like the Lagos wind, unhurried, yet relentless. Soon, Jeffrey reached Primary 5. The school was preparing for a major international competition, and the principal had to choose the brightest students to represent them. The decision was unanimous. Jeffrey's name was the first on everyone's lips. When he returned home that evening, his joy could not be contained. He burst into their tiny room like sunlight through cracked glass, shouting, "Mommy! Daddy! I've been chosen! I'll represent the school in the international competition!" Mr. James looked at his son, pride glistening in weary eyes. They urged him to stay home and study during the holiday, to rest and prepare. But Jeffrey refused. "I can do both," he said softly but firmly. "I'll help at the site and still study hard. I won't leave any stone unturned." And he kept his word. By day, he mixed cement with his father. By night, he mixed equations and dreams. Then came the competition day. The hall was charged with nerves and brilliance. Young minds hunched over papers, pencils scratching destiny into existence. The exam was tough, designed to sieve potential from mere talent. But Jeffrey's calm was unshakable. The ancestors must have whispered to him that morning, for his hand moved as though guided by purpose itself. Days later, when the results were released, the news spread like wildfire. Jeffrey topped them all. He didn't just win, he conquered. His school was crowned best in the state, and Jeffrey received a full scholarship to Harvard University. The principal wept tears of joy as he dialed Mr. and Mrs. James. His voice trembled as he said, "Your son has made history." At home, joy exploded like sunrise. Mr. James lifted his hands heavenward, whispering, "Thank you, Lord." Mrs. Margaret could only cry. When Jeffrey came home, he held out the scholarship letter like a sacred offering. "Mama, Papa, this is for us." The next morning, the construction site was alive with celebration. The manager, the architect, and the workers cheered as if their own child had conquered the world. They weren't surprised, only proud. "We told you," said Mr. Isaac softly. "He was never ordinary." And so Jeffrey journeyed from the dust of Lagos to the polished halls of Harvard, from mixing cement to sketching skylines. He carried his humility like a crown and his gratitude like breath. He never forgot his parents. He never forgot the architect and the manager who saw light where others saw dirt. For Jeffrey knew, the tree that forgets its roots will fall to its own shadow. And so began not just the story of Jeffrey, but the legacy of a boy who turned dust into destiny, and who proved that even the smallest seed can touch the heavens if it's planted in faith. The boy's name was Jeffrey, slender, dark-skinned, and driven by a fire that seemed borrowed from the sun itself. In the corners of his small Lagos home, he used to draw towers on old cardboard boxes. He wanted to be an architect, the world's best architect, and to build the tallest building the earth had ever seen. At Harvard University, where the snow fell like powdered dreams, Jeffrey's light burned brighter than any chandelier. He outperformed everyone, not out of pride, but out of purpose. No shadow could outshine his brilliance. His lecturers whispered among themselves, astonished that a young black boy on scholarship carried such hunger in his eyes, a hunger not for fame, but for destiny. "Diligence," his late father used to say, "is the drumbeat of the wise. The one who walks with purpose never walks alone." And so Jeffrey studied everything. When he didn't understand, he asked. When he failed, he tried again. There was a rhythm to his struggle, a kind of sacred music only those who believe in the impossible can hear. Years rolled by like the turning of seasons. The boy who once sketched towers on cardboard graduated from Harvard with honors. The applause thundered across the hall, but inside Jeffrey's heart, there was only stillness, the calm satisfaction of a seed that had become a tree. Soon, the world came knocking. A powerful international company approached him with an offer to design and construct a building that would echo across history. They wanted something tall, something magnificent, a monument that would kiss the clouds and announce their prestige to the world. Jeffrey accepted the challenge. He knew the path ahead would not be smooth, but he also knew the river that forgets its source will dry before its time. He remembered his roots, his mother's prayers, and his people's silent hope resting on his shoulders. Day after day, night after night, Jeffrey worked like a man possessed by vision. His sketches became blueprints. His blueprints became foundations. The construction site became a battlefield of brilliance, steel against the sky, sweat against gravity. He guided his team with patience and purpose, never raising his voice, only lifting their spirits. Brick by brick, dream by dream, the edifice rose, not just in height, but in meaning. Each window reflected the sun like the eye of God watching a promise being fulfilled. And when it was finally complete, the world stood still. On the day of unveiling, the company executives arrived, men in polished suits, women in silent awe. Before them stood the world's tallest mosaic building, shimmering like a crown of glass and concrete. They were stunned, speechless, their faces baptized in wonder. Jeffrey stood before his creation, hands clasped, eyes glistening. In that moment, he wasn't just an architect. He was proof that faith, when mixed with focus, could bend reality. The ancestors seemed to whisper in the wind. Even the tallest tree was once a seed buried in darkness. Global recognition poured in like rain. Cameras flashed. Awards followed. Money, fame, honor. All the things he once dreamt of came in abundance. But deep within, Jeffrey knew the true reward was not in applause, but in legacy. He had built something that time itself would salute. And so, when the journalists gathered that day, microphones trembling with admiration, Jeffrey smiled faintly and said, "This is my story." One reporter, overwhelmed, said, "Wow, what a lovely and inspiring story. Indeed, your story teaches us that with resilience, faith, and the right mindset, dreams can truly come true." Jeffrey nodded gently. His gaze drifted upward to the tower that touched the heavens. For him, it was never about the building. It was about becoming the kind of man who could build it. And that is the story of Jeffrey, the man who built the tallest building in the whole world. Dear viewers, thank you so much for watching. Jeffrey's story reminds us that greatness is born from hard work, faith, and love. No matter where you start, dedication and courage can turn even dust into destiny. If this inspired you, please like, share, and subscribe. Let's spread hope and motivation together. Remember, your dreams matter, your efforts count, and your story is still being written.